This week on the OneCast, I'm back from vacation, and we're just going to run our traps about a bunch of stuff.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's going to be a bad day.
What's going on, OneCast fans of the OneCast? Welcome back for another week 33, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, something like that. We've been doing this for more than half a year, and it's been a ton of fun, and we're going to keep doing it. So
I'm laughing at Pete because he literally has episode 33 up there.
I do, and I now I'm not sure that that's correct, but it could be correct. It could not. I don't know. We'll find out, I guess, whenever we actually upload it. But yeah, make sure you head over to OneCastFishing.com. Check out their full line of baits. You got the snagless jigs, long neck hooks, weedless nets, soft plastics to match or to fish on your traditional Texas rig hooks and stuff if that's what you want to do. But make sure you head over there and check them out. Use the code TheOneCast at checkout. Save yourself some money and support those that help support us. Make sure you check out the veteran organizations. I'll scroll across the bottom if you're watching the video. If you're not, they'll be linked in the description. We'll get back into talking about them some more in the coming weeks, but kind of taking a break from hammering y'all with a bunch of stuff right at the beginning. Hopefully we have some new partnerships coming. We get to announce here pretty soon. We're excited about that. So keep your eyes and ears and faces peeled for that. But what's going on, guys? I'm glad to be back in the studio. Had a family vacation last week. So if y'all watch or listened, I was remote from the beach with my family.
You did a little bit of saltwater fishing, didn't you?
Yeah, I did a little bit of saltwater fishing, caught some flounder and a few little redfish, and didn't really fish a whole lot. I'm sure it was hot here, but it was really hot in South Carolina.
So there's been first of all, it was super selfish of you to take a vacation. So we're glad that you had a great time. But no, just kidding, man. Ben and I are super glad that you did. And I'm glad that you made it back safe. And, honestly, I wish I could have been down there doing some offshore fishing and stuff because, unlike bass fishing where, those fish can be super stingy, the salt is where it's at if you just want to go have a great time and just catch a fish, man. You're just going to catch one. But I did want to kind of caveat off what Pete was saying with, going to OneCastFishing.com, use the code TheOneCast. If you notice the names in the soft plastics, right? People may have questions like, oh, what is the warthog? What is the stinger? What is this? They correlate, and obviously Ben is sitting right here, but, it's a veteran-owned company, and Ben served, and I'm still serving, but, those names of those soft plastics correlate with a different weapon system that we use in the United States Army. Yeah. Is that accurate, Ben?
Yeah, they're typically either an aircraft or some type of missile system, so like a javelin or stinger. So something that has a lot of effect out there to snatch up those bass. So
that's right, but they are cool. They're creative. So if you got any questions on where the names come from and stuff like that, that's where they came from, and we'll dive deeper into that if you need us to. So, but dude, glad to have you back, Pete. Ready to run our traps, about things that are going on in the bass fishing industry and the outdoor space and stuff, and sometimes there's not a whole lot that's going on, right? You kind of see the news and you see the same old, the TikToks become really mundane as you're watching them. Everyone ramping up for a tournament, practice sucks. It was a grind, and everyone's pushing that stuff out there. And then the post-tournament recap, these are all the baits I caught them on and stuff like that. But you wanted to talk about, and I don't know if you guys want to jump into it right now.
I think first I just want to say Joey Cifuentes winning another one in his rookie year.
Yeah, that's something to talk about. I totally forgot about that.
That is – so this would have been, last weekend. So this is 2 weeks post, but we're going to talk about it now. One thing, I know everybody wants to hear the hot take and all that right when it happens. Sometimes it gets frustrating for us because we're a week behind news, but I also like it because it gives us time when there's drama or something that goes on to gather facts. So we're not just going with a hot take and then having to retract or say, hey, we were wrong. But Joey won. Forward Facing Sonar, Randy, once again, played a big role in that. The launch that they went out of there, I've fished out of that launch a lot. I mean, every year for 15 years, we went up there and fished for a week right out of Anchor Bay there. It's a cool launch. I've seen a lot of boats and trucks back completely underwater there. I saw a James Bond car one time there. We were there.
What?
We were taking the boat out, and somebody had one of those, like they were a boat and a car. So we're sitting there loading the boat, and all of a sudden this sports car comes down the ramp, and just drives right into the water. And we're like, and then it's just bloop, bloop, it just takes off across the water.
I don't know why this made me think of this, because you said maybe James Bond, but I did go see Mission Impossible this past weekend. Definitely recommend it.
Oh,
Really?
that new one.
There's another one out?
Well, it's Mission Impossible 7 Part 1, and it's a 3-hour movie
Jeez.
for Part 1.
Is this
But
still Tom Cruise?
it's still Tom Cruise. It's got a lot of the original cast in there from like the first few. So
I might have to check that.
yeah,
out.
it's definitely a good one. But go back to what you talked
But yeah, so Anchor Bay,
Oh,
where they put in
Which lake were they on?
Lake St. Clair. So that area, and a lot of the guys.
It's a
who
really
fish-
small lake, I heard.
it is a small lake.
Yeah, only like 500 million acres.
No, I mean, it's not quite that big, but compared to the other lakes in the area, it's
Yeah.
a small lake. I mean, you can run from Anchor Bay there, which is basically right in Detroit, if
Yep.
you want to say that, to Canada. You can see shore across it at all times if it's a clear day.
Mm.
So you can make that run in a bass boat in, an hour. So it's not a huge lake if you're talking like Erie and the other Great Lakes. It is a big lake, but that area where a lot of, I think 4 of the top 10 fish the whole time in Anchor Bay is where we concentrate when I fished up there. And so it was kind of cool to see them catching fish in spots that I did growing up as a kid. I still think it's probably the best lake fishery.
I mean, they had,
It's incredible fishery, man.
I forget which day it was. They had 40 20-pound bags.
I think I was day 2 when
It was
he had a 25-pound bag. Who was that? Taku had 25 pounds. I think second Palmer, didn't he have like a 24-pound bag that day? And then
All I know is like there was a lot of 20-pound plus bags.
Yeah.
And Mercer even set it up on stage. He was like, man, like this lake wasn't giving up. And it was interesting, like you said, Anchor Bay, majority of the field, that's where the big bags are being produced out of.
except on Joey did not go there on the last day, if I remember correctly.
No, I don't think so.
no, he didn't.
Yeah.
And that's what there was 104 boats fishing the elites this year. So they were able to spread out a little bit. The river's in play. Not too many guys would have went into the river because that's mostly bass fishing in the river. You do catch some smallmouth in there, but not like on the lake. If somebody, I'll say that haven't spent a bunch of time up there. If the lake got rough, we'd go in there and catch largemouth and some pretty good ones. I mean, I've caught several 5+ out of Lake St. Clair, largemouth. But it's a smallmouth game. And when I was real little, my dad would just give me a spinning rod with a tube, and they would be fishing, and I would just drag that tube behind the boat. And I can't tell you how many days of 5, 10, 4-pounders you would have. Not even knowing what I was doing in a little John boat as a 6-year-old kid, So those guys went up there and it put out, man. It's if you're looking for a smallmouth fishery that's not super hard to break down, it's not a deep lake. I highly recommend taking a trip to St. Clair and checking it out.
I think one of the cool things about those fisheries is, we talk about how advanced technology is getting and unaffordable, how unaffordable the technology is with forward facing sonars and 360s and boats in general and all that stuff. But the really cool thing, and you can do this on largemouth lakes too, but it's far easier in the north with smallies. You can go out there and be really simple and catch smallmouth, right? And when you look at the recap, and again, congratulations to Cifuentes, like second win of the year, leading rookie of the year points, just phenomenal statistics that the guy has. But putting all that stuff aside, everyone's like so hyper focused on technology and you got to have this. Man, you go and just throw a drop shot, because that's how they were catching them. Drop shots, Ned rigs, tubes, right? Maybe some jerk baits. It's very simple on the way to catch those fish. So with all the glamour and all the, shiny objects that the bass fishing world and the outdoor space has to offer right now, it still doesn't matter. Go up there, go to Lake St. Clair, just get in a little boat, whatever you have, go off or go on the shore, throw a drop shot, throw a tube, and you're going to catch a smallmouth, man. And that's a pretty cool thing.
Have a unit with a halfway decent map and go to the red spots, and you'll catch them on St. Clair.
It's definitely on one of my bucket lists, because I just want to go up there and catch a bunch of 3-pounders.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what most of the field would catch them at 3.5-pounders.
Yeah.
That got you 50th or something.
Yep.
It might be a little more difficult to find those 4 and 5-pounders consistently, find the right schools. And that's what obviously the top 10 did and Joey did out there. But it'd be fun to go catch 100 fish, 50, 100 fish out there, all 2.5 to 3 pounds. It'd just be a blast.
It was
Yeah.
crazy to see guys catch 20 pounds 2 days in a row and not make the cut.
I mean, it was ridiculous.
Like, that just tells you how good it was fishing. I like going up there like the first week of June, as long as they don't have a real long winter, just because those fish are usually pre-spawn that first week and they get shallower and in the weeds, and you can have an absolute slugfest burning a spinnerbait. And when those big 4-pound pre-spawn fish smoke a spinnerbait, it is a ton of fun. So that's when I like to go up. But St. Clair, if you're looking for a smallmouth lake that's not super hard to catch fish on and break down, not as much water, I definitely recommend St. Clair. Just don't stay in the hotel that Jordan Lee did, because you're not allowed to back your boat up.
You gotta imagine, like,
Did you see that when the Bass Pro Tour was there? When he had his boat back up. I think we talked about it.
And that's why Poche couldn't fish this week, this last tournament, because he had already been there within the 28 days.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, and you see him, not to jump on the Poche train, but you see him in the Angler of the Year points. Like, actually, he's above a lot of people, but he's not doing that great because he's missed
he's like
tournaments.
He's
so
like
far.
98th in the Angler of the Year.
But this first year's free, right? This first year's free for him, so he's not really worried about a cut. But what I do want to say is, on the smallmouth fishery stuff, man, I just lost my train of thought. It's got to be extremely humbling for some of those really seasoned veterans that are on the elites, right? To have a rookie like Joey Cifuentes who is able to beat them at finding those different class of fish, right? Where he was able to put the pieces together with the 4 and 5 pounders, where they were just catching the 3.5, 3 3/4 pounders, right? So the sport of bass fishing, the competitive side of bass fishing, it is by far the most humbling sport that I've ever been a part of, right?
It is, but the thing with the elites, though, like when you get to that level, if you look at Joey, like, that dude's been fishing the Toyotas and the Opens for like 10 years. Like, he has experience on these bodies of water, so he understands how to break them down a little more. But yeah, I mean, if he's out there KVDs catching 3.5 pounders and a guy like Joey comes in and starts catching 5, it's definitely humbling.
I mean, it just goes to show how well Joey's proven this wrong, but it's extremely hard to actually win a tournament on that level.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
KVD, he's got 20 some, but that's over like a 35-year career. G-Man, Gerald Swindo, 2 Angler of the Year, is one of the best anglers on tour by far. He's never won a blue trophy.
No.
And Joey has won 2
in the same rookie year.
I also it's extremely hard to win at that level, but I also feel like the skill gap, and we've talked about it before, is closing because of electronics and the information. So the old jig draggers and stuff that go out there and knew what they were doing and what they were looking for, that learning curve between the younger guys and those older guys is cut because of forward facing sonar, because of side imaging, because of down imaging, because of better imaging, better mapping. Look, I can't imagine the money that Lowrance and Navionics and Humminbird and all them are putting to have people go out and map these lakes, just drive around and map the lake, mark stuff. Like, they're spending big money to provide that information to anglers. So there's a lot more now. But yeah, I mean, look at John won early in his career, and then it was 15 years before he won another one.
Yeah.
And we have to admit, there's a lot of luck involved, because all those guys are great, and you only get 2.5, 3 days of practice, and you map out, you strategize what you're going to look at, you based upon your history, on all your research. You just happen to hope you find the right stuff.
Yeah.
And, you're looking for a needle in the haystack sometimes, and someone's going to find it. It seems to be that way, but it's not easy to find. And there's a little bit of luck that you just pulled up at the right spot at the right time, and you kind of figured it out.
I think especially with those smallmouths, and I know we all hate the Sabine River.
I love it.
Smallmouth fisheries are a lot like that, though, because like everybody's catching 3.5 pounders. Just a guy that just happens to find that school that has 2 4.5 and a 5 in it instead of all 3.5. So there is luck, especially on those northern smallmouth lakes, because it's limited. There's only so many spots, flats, where those fish are. Everybody's vying for that stuff. And like you said, you have to be the one that catch those 4 pound. And it might just be Well, the 4-pounders ate when I was there, and I left, and somebody comes over behind me and catches 5 3-pounders.
I mean, you look at how close the weights were, and the difference between like a 3.5 and maybe a 3 3/4 and 4 pound on side imaging, down imaging, or live scope. There's not much difference in the size there, and so you actually have to catch them, and then hopefully you're in the right spot.
I don't know if you. Well, first of all, my question to you guys is, it's interesting, like rookie year, right? Like it's not like the first year these, you just said it. It's not the first year these guys have bass fished.
Yeah.
But you might have guys that have fished for 25 years or plus in the industry. Maybe they were a former FLW guy like Bradley Hallman. Maybe they fished the elites before, and then they requalified their way back in. When they requalify, and this is a question, when they requalify, so if Destin DeMarion requalifies for the elites or Harvey Horn, are they considered a rookie?
I think once you qualify, that rookie's only the first year that you fish.
Poche's not up there for rookie of the year.
Okay, that's right. But I think rookie is very deceiving in itself, obviously, minus the fact that this is the first year you've ever done this in this organization. And that's a rookie.
And especially as we move forward with the EQ series.
Right.
Because they are fishing all 9, because they are doing all the travel, because there is an official practice period. It is longer than the elites,
right?
It's 5 days, but still, right? You can't go out there and camp for a month, 2 months anymore like you used to be able to do. So the learning curve is going to get smaller in that sense. I think as guys continue to qualify through the new system. And again, this is the first year, but the guys who are going to come on are probably going to be hammers, and it's just going to get harder and harder.
Yeah.
The guys coming in are going to be much better prepared. That's not the right word, but that's what
like far better prepared.
They're going to be far better prepared than guys that came in before them, just because of having to fish all 9. And not that going out and winning one and finishing high enough to win your region to qualify wasn't a hard thing to do, but it's a lot easier to go out and win one tournament and finish in the top 10 and 2 other ones to qualify for the elites than it is to stay in that top 10 range across 9 events against 175 other guys.
And we've talked to
gals.
Several anglers on the NPFL, and one of the adjustments they have, right, is just that limited practice period.
Yeah.
And be able to break it down instead of, going from a BFL and fishing, multiple days pre-fishing or multiple weekends in a row, or like I said, with the opens, like when I was down at, 2.5 years ago, I mean, there were guys getting ready to fish the open and they were there 2-3 weeks before the event even kicked off. So
it's curious because you think about, like, for us getting ready for a tournament we fish, we might only get to practice one day and we come up with a plan and we go in there. So you would think do you get so far removed from that to where once you're fishing professionally and you're chasing that dream where you're fishing more and more and more, like you lose that practice mentality and it takes time to get it back? It's interesting to think, because the more I think about it, like, I can go out and run around one day and have a plan and have a pretty good idea where some fish are. But then when you get to that level, it's like, oh, well, they have to adjust now to having 3 days. And it's like, well, all of us when we started had 0 or 1. You're also on a local lake. Like, I get that. But
and it's also, right, these are multiple day tournaments.
I think that's the biggest adjustment.
And you have to manage fish and be able to adjust to the conditions. And you really have to practice. Like, you may be on day 1 of practice based upon wind conditions, and that's what the wind's going to be probably on Championship Sunday. So you're practicing, hoping like you make the final cut.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys heard Trent talk about that, right? Like, he has his A hole, his B hole, C hole, and D hole. And I think that's, Ben, you talked about it with the EQs. It did upset a lot of people with the way that they changed it. But I think a lot of the growing pains just fishing, getting to the elites and fishing that, it wasn't the fishing side of it. It was all the logistics and all the other stuff that goes into traveling nationally, and room and board and food preparation and practice time and all that stuff. Yeah, of course, managing fish over a 4-day period, if you even make it past day 2, is going to be a challenge. But when you look at it, like preparing for a 1-day tournament, there's no comparison with a 4-day tournament.
No, absolutely.
You got to fish for the future, whereas you got to fish, tomorrow's the future. But, you talked about a needle in the haystack, like finding that needle in the haystack. How do you find a needle in the haystack when you got 5 million boats on the water with you?
Yeah, that can complicate things.
Trey, that was a good transition there because the other thing we want to talk about, and it has caused some waves recently on social media, is that the recent high school championship down at Lake Hartwell had 451 boats. And I saw a video before a blast off, and it looked like you could walk across just the lights
Yep.
going across the lake on all the boats that are out there. It was crazy how many boats were out there. So I like to hear you guys, take on that. Is how do you, right? Because there's pros and cons. You want people to fish, you want to grow the industry, perhaps, but at the same time, there's some safety. There's a competitive issues. There's a lot involved. So I like to hear you guys take.
There's
on
a
that.
difference between growing the industry and abusing a resource. I don't want to say abusing, but
Saturating.
oversaturating a resource. And yes, we want people out fishing. I don't have a problem with having more people out fishing. Like, a lot of people get upset. I think it's good that there's more boats fishing. Does it get frustrating sometimes? Absolutely. When there's 9 guys trying to fish the same point in the middle of June, but I also don't think at least me personally, when I talk about growing the sport, it's 900 people fishing a tournament over 2 days.
Yeah, because the high school tournaments are team tournaments. So 451 boats, probably most, if not all, had 2 anglers on there. So almost 900 lines in the water at any given time. That's a lot of pressure. Even though Lake Hartwell is a decently sized, bigger lake, that's a lot of pressure out there.
Yep.
Man,
I
I don't want to come across as hypocritical, because it's very easy to say, well, you guys talk all the time about getting new people fishing, and now you're saying I want people to fish. I want them to get out and fish. But something has to be done when it comes to tournaments. And the organizations, and everybody knows I've been hypercritical of MLF and the way they run their organization. I'm going to be hypercritical of Bass. I'm going to be hypercritical of the NPFL. If we don't do something, if the organizations aren't going to do something about the lakes they're fishing, when they're fishing them, stacking tournaments back to back, fisheries are affected. Now,
Sure.
Ben, we had this discussion a little bit off camera. I'm not saying they're affected in fish kill, because those organizations do a wonderful job of keeping fish alive. Local tournaments don't always do a wonderful job. The lower you go, the more fish die. It's the way it is. I don't want to hear my club never kills them. Your club kills fish. Like, it happens. It's what it is. It's part of the game. It happens at the elite level. Brandon Paulunick lost the tournament this year because of a dead fish. Like, it does happen. But it absolutely changes fish behavior when you start to get 900 people out there fishing for them. And now that we're not targeting fish offshore, let me put another thing out there. It's not new. Like, we've been doing it since side imaging came out 20 years ago. They said remember when side imaging came out, how it was going to kill fisheries? Do you guys remember that?
Oh, yeah.
It's the same thing they're talking about with forward facing. It's not anything it's not like we're fishing new water that was never fished before. It's been getting fished. We can just see how the fish act now.
Yeah.
And Trey and I, Ben and I, anybody that has forward facing can tell you, like, it's changing what we know about fish behavior. Because we were just talking about, like, I'll talk about Sharon Harris. Like, the fish have been suspended a ton this year, right?
Almost
so
the
Trey
entire
and I
summer.
are out there fishing a few weeks ago, and a thunderstorm's rolling in. It gets cloudy. You can feel the temperature drop. There's pressure moving in. You're like, those fish are going to suck to the bottom. It's about to be on. Then fish suspended right through it. And we were all raised to think cloudy skies, those fish belly down to the bottom. That's not the case. Is that because of pressure? I don't know. I do know that on Harris, we have to fish a lot more finesse techniques than we used to get fish to bite.
Yes.
Not saying if you don't find them set up right, you still can't smack them on a crankbait, but it's not the same. And it's the same on Jordan. Like, there's only so many areas on a lake that hold fish when the water gets hot. There's always going to be some fish shallow. To my shallow guys, like, I know they're up there in the laydowns. Some people aren't comfortable doing it. Offshore, there's only so much space for them. The more people out there hammering them, throwing baits, catching them, releasing them, catching them, keeping them, you're going to have kill. It's going to affect the way they behave. You only have to get jaw jacked so many times before you go, oh, maybe I'm not going to stay on this point.
Yeah.
And you start to get, Trey was talking about finding a school somewhere where we'd never found a school. And they were there one evening, they were gone the next morning. Like, I think we're starting to see more pelagic schools of bass. They're moving more. They're not necessarily going to those old summertime hogs and just sitting there for the year, because they're seeing people target them more Part of that is more anglers, which is great. Part of that is tournament pressure, in my opinion, because those fish are getting jacked, hauled away in, released, eventually making their way somewhere else. A week later, they're getting caught, thrown in a live well, ran somewhere else. If the organizations aren't going to do a better job of working together, and when we had Paul and Brad on, they talked about, like, we want to work with bass. We want to talk to those guys. We want to fish. We want to know their schedule so we can fish different, or we can back off from them so we're not fishing back to back. If those organizations aren't going to work together, the state's going to have to step in. And I know a lot of people got angry. Andy Cox, if you watch this, I know you guys in Illinois are angry. And I understand why you're angry with the fees and stuff that they're charging for tournaments. But limiting the number of ramp permits and the number of tournaments that can be run is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
Somebody has got to do something, because eventually tournament pressure is going to start killing more fish, and it's going to affect the fishery through the death of fish and not being able to resupply through the spawn. You think about it. If you have, this is pure hypothetical, we're going to get Corey back on to talk about it. But if you have, I'll use Jordan Lake. If you have a 100-boat tournament every weekend through the summer, say that's 12 tournaments, and everybody weighs 5 fish, that's 500 fish. And if 50% of those die, that's 250 fish dead every weekend, right? Eventually, that's going to catch up. You have one bad spawn year, that's going to be really evident, right?
Or
Because
a high
now
water.
you have a high water where we've had spawns be weird. We don't know how good the spawns would be. Like, eventually, those numbers are going to catch up, right? And I know I'm inflating numbers, but it's easier to use round numbers.
Well, you got to
that.
use like hypothetical worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
If the state or somebody doesn't stop in, the tournament organizations aren't gonna police themselves, in my opinion.
Well, because there's too much money in it.
Absolutely,
right.
Especially the big,
So-
even local trail organizations. There's big money in some of those with sponsors and things.
So it looks like we've got a couple of issues here with, tournaments at large, and right. That's just the most egregious example recently, but obviously the Opens and the MLF.
Yeah, Opens are what, 250 boats? We were just talking about.
Yeah.
It's 250. I think Toyota's 250. BFLs aren't capped, but usually you don't see more than 200 boats in a BFL.
But so we got a couple of different issues here. We obviously got the issue of the conservation aspect, and I think the states need to do a better job of managing, or really taking the data to determine what the impact is. Because like your rationale, if fish get tired of getting jaw jacked, they're going to move, and now less anglers are going to find them, over time, and right, it can balance out potentially in the future.
Potentially,
but
if they survive.
The other issue though is it's kind of a competitive thing for me. So 451 boats out there is a lot, and this is where I'm critical on bass. Right, they all qualified through the qualification series, right, for bass.
So you have to do something at your local. We looked at it; it was hard to find exacts. We'll reach out to Kieran and see, but you have to qualify through the Opens and through your local division.
And it should really be capped probably at a state, how many people from a state should go, and you should have a tier and manage that through. Because I think about it, as a competitor out there, and one of two things can happen, right? On a field that big, right? Maybe the best angler that's actually out there, theoretically the best angler out there, he's the high school prodigy, right? He found that secret juice that no one knows about anyone, right? And that team wins. Awesome. But at the other side, there's hammers. I guarantee you there were hammers out there that are really good, who dominate in their local areas, maybe in their state. They went out and practice, and every time they wanted to pull up on a spot, there's 7 other boats there. Right. And it becomes a competitive thing. How do you kind of weed out who's the best when there's just so many people out there and there's only so much water to go to?
We just talked about earlier, how do you manage fish over a 2-day tournament if there's
how do you manage people, right? So
with no cut.
Let me bring
fishes both days, by the way.
Let me bring a different perspective into it. So as an organization, you have a responsibility for accountability. So just being accountable for soldiers in the Army is hard enough. And then you're talking about being accountable for 900 people, potentially. So there's that. That, to me, is a logistical nightmare. If there's an accident on the water, if there's something going on, like, it is really challenging for a tournament director or those who are part of the organization to police that up and to manage that. So that's an issue. Not to mention there's boat captains on each one of those boats. So let's go ahead and times times those numbers, right?
Well, they're not
three-
fishing though. So.
They're not fishing, but there's 3 people for 451 boats. So whatever the math is on that.
1350.
So 1,350 people, right? Do the math, Pete. So you have 1,350 people on the water. That was pretty darn good, Ben.
Good,
It's actually
man.
1353.
It was
but-
1350 if you just go 450.
So
I didn't go 450.
So from a logistical standpoint, from a safety and accountability standpoint, we've seen accidents on the water, right? You know, unprepared fishermen. Yeah, of course they got their stuff that they got to go through when they're in these tournaments. But let's be honest, like nobody tests the boat captains and nobody tests the anglers on their how efficient they are on the water. So a safety standpoint, right? 481. That's crazy. 51. That's crazy. 2, when we talk about growing the sport, everyone wants to grow the sport, but then they get really irritated when other people are on their spots when they're on the water because we're growing the sport and more people are interested, so they want to be on the water. So it's really annoying from the tournament angler perspective when people are sitting on your juice hole. But what else grows the industry is the ability to catch fish. So I think in the future, because of how educated these fish are, because of potential mortality issues, because of all these things, what gets a child interested in fishing?
Catching fish.
Catching fish. So we may not see this in the next 5, 10, 20 years. This could be a larger or a far further down the road, right? But if fish are so educated or potentially underpopulated or a culmination of all the above, and people just aren't catching them anymore, we might actually be doing more harm to the industry than good because people are going to lose interest in it. You know, when you look back in the 90s and we start looking at salmon fishing in northern Michigan and Wisconsin, you used to be able to have 5 a day and you used to be able to snag them. Why? Because if fish are going up to the last point that they can reach, they spawn and they die. They got like a 5-year lifespan. They come from the Great Lakes and move into the rivers. Then Fish and Wildlife changed it, or DNR up there, and they changed it to a 3 fish limit to where now you got to catch them in the mouth. Well, anglers were really upset about that. Why are you changing my creel limit? Why does it matter if I snag a fish because they're dying? All the above. They didn't think about what was happening under the water, where there was 100-pound monofilament at the time back in the day, giant treble hooks with lead weights, all that stuff getting broke off, contaminating the river system, right? Where they'd have to send divers in there annually to clean that stuff out, costing the state money. You know, I'm not saying this is happening to all of our lakes, but there's a significant amount of debris that's getting broke off into our lakes. There's a lot of lead going in our lakes. I know it's not super toxic.
You want to know a way to prevent that?
Tungsten.
Buy snagless jigs.
Snagless jigs. You
Right.
break off less often.
Yeah. But like, it's not just, and we had Corey in here, right? And we definitely need to bring him back, but it's not just one thing, man. So like when you look at a tournament, and I know Pete was very, interested in bringing this topic up, 1,353 people on a body of water on one day of the year,
2 days.
2 days of the year, dude, that is significant. Right. And so, and that's not only that tournament, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nighters, every single weekend, Saturdays and Sundays, right? Like we have blown up tournament fishing, but we always equate that into, well, because we've blown up tournament fishing, we're growing the sport. But is that always a good thing?
But it's not, as like we've talked about it, 50 million anglers and less than 1% are the tournament bass
Right.
anglers. Like we're as a tournament angler, we get selfish. Like, and I'll admit it myself. Like we can be very selfish. I want people on the water. I want new people.
But you don't want them on there when you're
but
there.
I don't want them sitting on my spot when I got a tournament going on and I got a juice hole and
Right.
Pappy's out there in his John boat, jaw jacking crappie off my bass hole. Like I don't want it. You're right. When I'm tournament fishing, I love to see it on a regular Saturday if I'm just out having fun. Look at that guy with his grandkid. But like we get selfish, and I'll admit, all 3 of us.
I do it all the time.
We get selfish, like totally become contradictory to what we
100%.
preach when we're out there fishing a tournament. But as tournament anglers, we're the most visible.
We are.
And how we treat a resource and how we manage that resource, our 1% is speaking for the entire 50 million
It is.
angler base, and that's, I don't know, that number's probably higher
No.
now, but the last number we got was 50 million. Like that 1% is what we see. They see it on TV, they see it on social media, they see it on the news when something stupid happens, like they shove lead weights in fish.
And let's
When
face-
eagles die and they attribute it to lead fishing weights, they see it on the news. Like,
Yep.
even though that's not a great example, but that's all. It's always, oh, it's a tournament fisherman. They're blowing down the lake at 100 miles an hour. They're doing this. They're doing that. They're killing all these fish because we see fish kill after the Thursday nighter in 110-degree weather when the water is 90 degrees.
And look, like us as bass anglers, because it's such a big industry, it's such a big sport. There is so much money involved, right, to win. Right, it's very competitive. That we probably put the most pressure on these fisheries. Tournament anglers by far put the most pressure on the bass fisheries,
100%.
right?
For sure.
I mean, that's just a fact, right?
But the bass fisheries aren't just bass fisheries.
No, I know, right? And I know there's crappie tournaments, walleye tournaments, catfish tournaments, and all, but it's not to the scale as bass fishing,
Right, because it's a sport fish.
Well, it depends on where you are.
I mean, like
so,
and it's a lot of people will be like, well, you're just on there for that one day. No, you're not. Competitive bass anglers are on the water Monday through Sunday, and they are out there trying to figure it out for their one-day tournament, and they're beating that lake to death. So imagine, I don't know if there's an off-limits period for the Bassmaster High School national championship or whatever, but just think about that. Like the pre-practice, the pre-practice, the practice, the tournament itself. That's not just 2 days, right? Those anglers are out there, and again, it's not a bad thing. But when is money more important than conservation? When you look at it from the organization's perspective,
and this
right?
This actually brought me just maybe remember when I was in Florida at the Harris Chain a couple of years ago. It was the Bassmaster High School Open event down there. And then the next weekend, I think it was the very next weekend, it was the Bassmaster Open, right? Which makes sense from a organization perspective, logistically, right? To have tournaments there kind of back to back, but that's a lot of boats.
Yeah, and I mean, Ben, Pete, and myself, we're not biologists. We're not subject matter experts in that field by any means.
Stayed at a Holiday Inn last night.
But yeah, I mean, like besides staying at a Holiday Inn Express and being a doctor, no, like I think there's some common sense that you just can't learn. You have it or you don't. And common sense would tell you, like, if you keep using overusing a certain resource, there's going to be there's a shelf life on that sometimes, right? And so we ask ourselves, like, when is enough? And listen, we're not the first ones having this conversation. There's multiple elite series anglers. There's people that are highly respected in the outdoor space that are having these conversations. Like, when should you put a cap on the tournaments, right? I mean, BASS at the elite level and at the open level does a fantastic job at capping them. They cap the elites. After day 2, only 50 progress. After day 3, only 10 progress, right? And other tournament organizations do the same thing. But this was a one-off. This was like, holy cow, over 400 boats in a tournament. That's crazy. And then think about the kids, right? How angry. How could you imagine? We'll have to talk to Kieran and Daryl and stuff, but how frustrating was that? You think that was for those kids who want to grow up in this industry?
Imagine being boat 451.
Oh my
By
goodness.
the time they blast off the other 450 boats, it's dang 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
You've missed the entire morning bite.
Yeah.
Like that.
Thank goodness there probably wasn't a shad spawn.
Those 450 boats aren't blasting off in 30 minutes.
Hopefully they're number 1 on day 2.
They do flip it.
Yeah. I was at Lake Watery one year, and they had a high school event down there. And I think I saw 4 of the high school boaters out there. Well, the boats where they had their captain. I saw at least 4 of the kids who were in the back of the boat. I think they were laying down. They weren't even fishing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a tough fishing day.
Yeah.
Bluebird skies, high pressure, all that type of stuff. But I mean, they weren't. A lot of those guys were not having a great time out there. And right, I mean, we go out there and right, we're having a difficult time in the tournament. Right, we don't enjoy that necessarily. We like being on the water. We like being out there doing what we love. But in the moment when you're trying to do the best you can and it's not happening for you, obviously you're not happy about it because you want to perform better. But that makes it very difficult. The positive side is maybe this is a problem because the explosion in the interest in high school bass fishing
Was so great.
Right, it's continuing to grow,
Right.
and maybe this is a call to action or a reckoning. It's like they need to restructure how they qualify.
Yeah.
Because if it was up to me, I would take a certain number from each state, and then maybe have so the top 2 or 3 from each state can go. Maybe there's a regional open, so like the people who qualified in the state from like 3 through 20, if they all go to a regional event, and then right there's some kind of open slots there, right? So you can maybe 150, 200 boat field. There's ways you can play the numbers and probably do regions and by state and make it so when you actually get there, it makes it more fun for the anglers. It makes it in a sense more competitive because you have more space in the water, more area to operate in. You can actually strategize and maybe stick to your plan a little bit more.
Yeah, it's just interesting that, and again, I'll be hypercritical of bass on this one too. The championship, right? Yeah. Just like the classic where only 50 can fish, plus or minus, right? The other ones. If everyone can, it almost seems like everyone did it for high school BASS. If everyone can do it, then you're not special. You know what I'm saying? So like, it's one of those things like if everyone can do it, then it's really not that special. Yeah. And that's just something to think about. And again, Ben, like maybe a call to action, like this is something to think about for the future.
It takes away opportunity for kids too. I mean, that's scholarship money that they win at this level, right? Like,
yeah, it's true.
I think it's 20. The winner's got 20. Is it 2,500 or 25? It's got to be 2,500. I can't imagine it's 25,000. But I mean, that's scholarship dollars that 451 kids or boats, teams. It's just crazy.
If it's only 2,500, they need to up that.
I don't know what it is.
Especially with 400.
There's a 2.5. It might be 25,000. I'd have to go back and look, but
that would be a great scholarship. But yeah, I mean, it's just you're out there competing for scholarship money to go to college and right do continue to career in what you love to do. And there's 100 boats.
Yeah.
On every single point you pull up on.
Yeah, and I think that tying it back into when we talked to Brad and Paul from the MPFL, they got a really good business model, right? Not everyone can do it, right? Bass fishing competitively at certain levels is not for everyone. That's why there's qualifying events and stuff. Being in the Army is not for everyone, right? And that goes for everything in life. But in order to be effective and call yourself like a certain level to be special, that means that not everyone can do it.
Yeah.
And so no matter how much of an advantage you think you have a forward facing sonar or a 250 horsepower engine or all these gizmos and gadgets, if you have one gajillion boats on the freaking lake, you can't even get to a spot. It don't even make a difference. It does not make a difference,
nope,
right?
It doesn't.
And when you take the enjoyment out of it, because we already know like tournaments are stressful as it is, and a lot of times it's not even that fun. But when you make it impossible to enjoy it, well, then you're actually not growing the sport. You're actually hurting it, in my opinion.
Yeah, because how many of those 451 kids are going to say, I don't know.
I'm not sure I want to do this.
Sure, anymore. I want to do this anymore. Or I'm sorry, 902 kids.
Yeah, I mean,
they're going to be like, this isn't really for me. Like, yeah. Why would I want to go out and do that and get frustrated, and your captain's frustrated, and it doesn't create a great learning environment, which honestly should be part of what junior bass is. Like, it's about learning tournament fishing and all of that. And, it's the same like peewee football through high school. Like, you're learning the game of football. You start to master that in college, and a small percentage of that in college moves on to the pros.
Yeah.
Where you could be considered a master. You're still learning. You still have coaches teaching you stuff. Things are still changing, but like at that level, it should be about having fun and learning. And if it were me at that age, like, I don't know, as much as I love fishing, if I went out there and had to deal with that, I don't know if I'd want to do it the next year. Honestly, like, do I really want to go out and deal with this headache? And
I can't even imagine what it was like to back your boat into the ramp.
Good. Better get there early.
the
son.
line to get there, like they better have porta potties lined up along the road because I would probably have to
Travis Cobra sent me a picture. They launched. You didn't have to launch at that launch.
go. Okay, that's good.
So they launched at one that was just like around the corner and idled. But like he sent me a Snapchat of coming around the corner, and it literally is across the entirety of lake. Like he goes and
But-
scans across the lake, and it's just freaking lights.
It's basically a panoramic picture
Yeah.
of just boats.
Now-
it looks like a city shore, and he's like, "Those are all boats, bro. Look close. You zoom in, you see all the green and red, and you're like, oh my goodness."
So for everyone, is it all about the anglers? No, it's not. Do you think the gas stations love them being there? Absolutely. You think the restaurants love them being there? Sure.
Chamber
the
of Commerce.
hotels, the Chamber of Commerce, right? There's a financial obligation here or a financial benefit from the business perspective, from the host community's perspective.
Yep.
So we're really looking at it just from the fish side of the house and the tournament angler side of the house. It's far bigger than that, and we all know that. But still, there has to be we got to find a healthy balance with that because that's just to me that's outrageous. And
somebody, whether it's the organization or
right,
the state,
right.
somebody at some point has to say.
And that's all we're asking for. Just
Yeah.
find a good balance.
Just find a good balance. But
I want everybody to have the opportunity to do it, but not at the same time.
yeah,
There's no way 451 teams should have qualified. I'm sorry. There's no way.
Yeah.
Could you imagine like Little League World Series being like, oh yeah, we're going to let 90 teams come in, best of 7. It'd be great for Williamsport up in PA and the hotels and the Airbnbs and the campgrounds and all that. But I mean, it'd be a nightmare to try to play all those games, like
you brought up the scholarships and you brought up some other stuff. It really doesn't seem like the anglers are the ones in a tournament that size that are benefiting from anything.
Not the most. They're not getting the most benefit.
Everyone else outside the anglers.
And again, I'll be
benefiting.
hypercritical of Bass. Like when you read like the blast when they announce where they're going. So they announce like, oh, junior national championship at Lake Hartwell. The city chamber of commerce is super excited to have us back for the 2 year. Of course they are, because they made $1 million off your kids last year.
Right.
Like, why wouldn't they be?
Yeah.
Like, and I get that that's important. Like having those relationships, making money for the community when you're visiting it, not just coming and abusing their resource and leaving, like, is important. But it seems to be that's where the focus goes. It's not these are the best junior anglers in the country. This is the Academy Sports and Outdoors Junior Bass Championship. The Lake Hartwell Chamber of Commerce welcomes BASS and the Bassmaster. Like it's not the anglers that are the hyper focus. And that's where when we talk about why we like the NPFL so much is because the very first thing you're going to hear is about the anglers, the sponsors. They're going to thank the chambers and stuff. They make those sweet plaques that is it Drunkwood or whoever makes it for them. They make those, they give it to this Chamber of Commerce, thanking them with the dates and stuff on there. It's really cool. Like, obviously they're thankful and they work with them, but that's not the most important thing to them. The most important thing to them is that their anglers have a platform to fish and to be able to grow their brand, to be able to win some money, to get better. And that's really at the end of the day what it should be about when you look at even at the elite series level. Like, it's about good competition and good anglers, but especially at the junior level. And it's a huge disservice to those kids that Bass did by letting 900 freaking kids go out there and fish.
I'll say this.
They did a disservice to those kids that spent their money, that traveled to fish the opens, that fish their locals, by basically saying everybody wants to complain about participation trophies. Well, there were some just letting folks in to let folks in at 451. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Why can't you take the top team or the top 2 teams from each state? That's puts you at 200, right? 50 states, not all 50. Alaska probably isn't going to have a team. Hawaii's probably not going to have a team. Like, there's states that aren't going to have it, right? But
did you know there's only been one bass ever caught in Alaska?
No.
Yeah, I need to go back when I did the best.
Where
bass.
was it caught? Do you remember?
I don't remember the lake. It was back when I did the best bass lake in every state, and then if I ever do the biggest bass ever caught in every state. But yeah, there was one caught in a lake, I think outside Juneau, either Juneau or
and so he has the only bass ever caught in the state record.
7 inches, and they killed it.
Of course they did, because
yeah.
it's invasive.
It's invasive. They're like, we don't know how this fish got here.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But he was able to find a needle in a haystack.
Yes.
Yeah.
What we're saying here is don't stop tournament fishing. Don't stop growing the industry. But if you want to give somebody the opportunity to find a needle in a haystack, don't make it impossible
You got
to where they can find just a needle in a stack of needles.
You got to,
you know what I mean?
Preserve the resource.
Preserve the resource, do your due diligence, make money, but you literally just took everything away from the angler on that one and made it all about like business, and in my opinion, right? So I don't know. It's interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of people that'll have feedback for us, and we really want to hear your feedback. I know there's a lot of people that are hot on the topic of like tournament fishing pressure has grown significantly since COVID. And it has, and we're seeing it here on our local lakes here in North Carolina. But you just see it, like everything that you see come across social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever else platform there is now, it's tournament. Like, where are the recreational fishermen out, right? And they're the ones that outnumber. But tournament anglers have the loudest voice in the industry. Tournament anglers have the loudest voice in the industry by far. And maybe we should use that voice wisely to preserve conservation, to preserve the sport, and to make it more interesting and just fun for us to fish now and in the future.
Yeah. And the last thing I got to say is, like, I was surprised when we opened up Fishing Friday and we asked about stuff that the majority of folks wanted, like, well, how do you fish a tournament? What's your thought? Like, that honestly surprised me.
Yeah.
I thought you'd get more like, well, show us how you tie knots, or how do you fish if it's raining, or how, but it was very much centered around tournament fishing. So it is the platform that people look to learn, the platform people want to learn, but we've got to figure out a way to do it more responsibly. Maybe, and I will say, like, I love when Boyd Duckett did catch, weigh, release, and did all the fish in MLF, like every fish counts. Maybe we got to start looking at going to a system where you somehow manage at a local level to help preserve, maybe not running those fish around, stress them out and killing them, letting them get back to where they are. I don't know, but Trey,
that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
Hey guys, like we said before, let's create a healthy balance. Let's help each other. Let's cultivate an environment of anglers helping anglers, one cast at a time.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.